Kakalosh Boker Tov. We're just going to do a very short, abridged version of how to kosher the different utensils, whether it's going to be in the kitchen, right, or kashering in general for Pesach. When we're talking about the way of koshering, usually the way that we're koshering is that the same way that we use it, that's how we're going to kosher it. In the Torah, when it's talking about Kli Midyan, it's written, anything that was in water, so you are going to purge it in water. Anything which was in dry, you have to come and you have to use it with a fire. And therefore, for example, you're going to take a pot. A pot, usually you cook in a pot with water. And therefore, when you want to kosher a pot, what you do is you're going to have to do Hagalah. Hagalah is the same way that the way that it's coming, you're going to take out the Isur with the same way. So you're going to cook it. So one of the ways of doing Hagalah is, for example, after the 24 hours is passed and now you haven't used it, which means that now it's going to give a negative taste, or in certain circumstances, b'diavad, or in other pressing needs, you're allowed to put soap inside and then it gives it a tam pagum, it gives it a negative taste. That was the shita, the Chazon Ish, what they used to do in the army in Israel, because they had to wait until the last moment before doing Hagalah. So now you can't wait 24 hours, they had to use the pots. So what they would do? They would add soap, giving it a tam pagum, a negative taste, to the pot, and then what they would do is they would do the Hagalah then and there. So after waiting the 24 hours, or if a person has pressing need, they had to put soap, and then they would come and they would kosher it, they would fill up a bigger pot, right, of water, and then they boil it up, and once it's bubbling, you would insert the smaller pot inside of it. Once you finish inserting the smaller pot inside of it, you take it out and you rinse it in cold water. Once you rinse it in cold water, it cannot be bolea, it cannot absorb anymore the water which was on top of it. So even if things came out, it will not come back in because you're putting it directly in cold water immediately afterwards. If the pot is too big, okay, so therefore you've got three different options. The way of three different options if the pot is too big is that what you're going to do is you're going to have the pot, right, which is the big pot here. I'm going to take hot water, right, directly from a urn, which is a kli rishon, which is on the fire, which means it's still connected, and I'm going to pour it in. By pouring it in, it's going to overflow. By overflowing, it's going to go on the outsides. Now I koshered it on the inside, because on the inside I already had the bubbling water bubbling up, and it koshered the outside. Another way is throwing in a hot stone inside of it, which also will cause it to bubble over and come on the sides. Or another third way, what you could do is that you could take a smaller pot, put it on the fire with hot water as well, and then what you do is you insert the smaller pot inside the bigger pot. When you're going to insert the smaller pot inside the bigger pot, it's going to cause to overflow, and again you get the same effect that it's koshering on the inside of the pot and the outside of the pot. So therefore, by doing that, that's three different ways of doing Hagalah if it's going to be on a big utensil. Nowadays, Baruch Hashem, we also have big, there's many places where they come and they do Hagalah, and they have these huge big pots that you could put in anything inside, and then you won't have that problem. To do with a pan, a frying pan. So now a frying pan is going to be a little bit different. Why? Because the frying pan, usually you do not use a lot of oil. Or if you don't use oil at all, sometimes people will come and they'll only use, for example, spray, and sometimes you won't use oil whatsoever. Now the problem is, if you don't use oil, so then what happens is that this frying pan now will require libun. It's not enough just anymore Hagalah. It would require libun, because if it does not have a liquid, so then you need libun. Now the problem is that if you would do libun, you would ruin the teflon, you would ruin what's the coating which is on top of it. So therefore, the Pri Megadim says, even if you would do libun to such a case, which means that you would come and you would actually take a fire and torch this pan, since you're afraid of doing it properly, you're afraid because you don't want to ruin, right? The entire purpose of getting a Teflon pan is for the Teflon. You don't want that it should stick. So therefore, what happens is it doesn't help the libun. So therefore, you have to be very, very careful in such a scenario of frying pans, because frying pans are a problem. Obviously, when we're talking about the pans and the pots, you do have to also kosher the handles, but the handles, usually all you have to do is irui kli rishon. The reason why is because the pot itself is a kli rishon, but the handle which is connected to this pot is only has to be done pouring hot water on top of it. When we're talking about the stovetop, so the stovetop, we know when you turn on the fire, it burns everything which is there. So if it's going to burn everything which is there, what do you already have to do? So you turn it on. What we usually tell people to do is you turn them on, not simultaneously, not at the same time. Do it one after another because you don't want to blow the fuse. But what you do is you turn each one of them on, right, for a maximum temperature for around, let's say, 25 minutes, half an hour, because usually you will never cook something a maximum temperature for more than that. And by doing that, you've kashered that space or that ring or wherever it is where you have the fire. The places around it, when everything is cooled down, either you could do it before or afterwards, when everything is cooled down and you've already koshered the 4 rings, or even before koshering the 4 rings, but you're going to do is you're going to pour boiling hot water all around. By doing that, you've kashered the space areas which is around it, because there, if anything became not kosher, it was only because of spills or things that went on the sides, so that you could just come and you could pour on the sides. When we're talking about the oven, obviously the oven, the best is a self-clean oven, because the self-clean oven completely burns everything which is inside of it. However, though, if a person does not have a self-clean oven, what he would have to do is he would have to clean the oven very well with a kita grasa, with some type of a grease cleaner, and then afterwards he would come and he would put, after waiting for 24 hours, he would put the oven on for maximum temperatures, and by having it for the maximum temperature of 3 hours, therefore he will be able to use the oven afterwards. Even with that, we tell people that it's still better to cover it, right, as much as possible, the food which is inside, right? 1 second. Yeah, so now what happens is the next halacha. The next halacha is afterwards is dishwasher. According to Sfaradim, what you're allowed to do is you're allowed to kosher the dishwasher for Pesach. What you do is you clean out the filter, and after cleaning out the filter, what you're going to be doing is that after cleaning out the filter, you're going to put on 2 different cycles, one with soap and one without soap at the maximum temperatures. By doing that afterwards, you're allowed to come and you're allowed to use the dishwasher. The fridge, obviously, everything is in cold or in the freezer, so all you have to do is just clean it, and then you have everything inside, and Bezrat Hashem will continue tomorrow with the other halachot.